Kia ora mahoma. It's the first day of spring here in New Zealand. So in today's video we're going to be looking at doing an experiment around yeast. It's another chemical reaction, but the interesting thing about using yeast in a chemical reaction is that yeast is basically a living thing. It's a kind of a fungus. But what we're going to do is we're going to do this experiment and we're going to be looking at mainly one of the byproducts of fermentation in particular. Specifically around the gases created during fermentation. But yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, stick around and I'll see you in the video. Back again. So we're going to do two experiments today, and we're going to be running them simultaneously because essentially they're going to be the same experiment, but we're going to be looking at them in two different ways. So the first experiment that we're going to look at is, I'm just going to have this my science jar. It's going to have a solution or a mixture made up of yeast, okay, plain baker's yeast, and warm water. And I'm just going to let it sit there, and so you get a visual of what's going to happen in the second experiment. This is all you're going to be able to see here is the fermentation process actually taking place. Now, the second experiment is my science bottle, and what's going to happen in here is essentially the same fermentation process, but we're going to have a balloon on the top of here, and it's going to be capturing the gases. So to start off with, the balloon is going to be empty and not doing much, and then as the fermentation process rolls over and takes place, you'll see that the balloon will increase in size till it starts inflating, and that's to show you the gases escaping. The gas produced is going to be carbon dioxide gas. Now what happens is when you add sugars to our friend here yeast, what happens is yeast needs moisture and it needs warmth, so I'm going to chuck these in the sun. And it also needs sugar because as a fungus, yeast has a really sweet tooth, and so basically essentially what it's doing is it's feeding on the sugar and it's expelling carbon dioxide gas. It's imagine like drinking a really fizzy carbonated drink and burping a lot. It's kind of a similar principle to that. And so that's what creates air inside bread, and that's what helps it rise, that release of carbon dioxide gas. Now, the second byproduct to fermentation, and a lot of people that are into home brewing and things will be familiar with this, maybe even ask your dad if he likes making his own beers and stuff at home, or mum, is when you leave the fermentation process for a long period of time, weeks and months, what happens is that the second part of fermentation, or the second byproduct of yeast going through that fermentation process, is the yeast turns those sugars into alcohol. We're not going to leave it that long, and we're not really interested in that part. We are interested in the carbon dioxide gases. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it to time lapse, and you're going to see me put the experiment together, and then you'll see me leave it out in the sun. Okay, well, I'm going to put it on one of the desks behind me, and you'll see things starting to happen. Okay. So stand by and keep watching, and you'll see everything take place. So guys, we're at the end of the experiment now, and you can see that in the time lapse, I've got to be very careful because if I bump the jar, the head on my ferment's going to disappear. But this is all the ferment. This is all the carbon dioxide gas trapped within the foam and sludge created from the yeast as a fungus. And in the bottle here you can see that my balloon has inflated from the ferment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully just move this bottle over and hold it up to the camera, and you can see the head of the ferment inside the bottle. It's actually quite warm because I was clever enough to stick it in the sun. One of the key elements, you can see there's the head and it goes from there to there. What I mean by head is that foam. But one of the key elements that you need to get this experiment to work, if you're going to do this experiment at home, is that you need it to be in a nice warm place. Like I said, yeast works best with a nice warm and moist environment, so like hot water and then sitting in the sun or in a hot water cupboard or something like that when you do bread. But it also needs sugar. So if I had hypothetically done this and I hadn't added any sugar, it probably wouldn't have done much, or it would have taken quite a long time for a ferment to actually develop. But yeah, I highly recommend doing this experiment. It's something a bit fun. It's what we would probably call kitchen science. If I left it in a vessel overnight, it might even inflate a little bit more, but I'm not going to do that. We're going to finish the experiment here. One of the things I'm going to say though is when you're doing this, don't put it in a vessel that's closed. I'm obviously using glass here, and that can be slightly dangerous, but I've got my balloon on top, so there's an ability for the pressure to escape, more or less, and the weakest point is the balloon, so it'll shoot off if it needs to. But don't ever put it in a glass vessel, or even a plastic vessel for that matter, and close it tight, because you're going to probably get it, it'll explode from the pressure, and that's really, really dangerous. But yeah, if you like this experiment, hit like. If you want to subscribe to the channel in general, hit subscribe. But for now, from Mr. Ashley, it's ka kite anō, and I'll see you next time on Mr. Ashley's Place.